Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of sources and research, and we really try to pull out the core insights you need on some pretty complex topics.
Yeah, and today we are diving into one of the most uh, fundamental and, frankly, uncomfortable contradictions in our economy: housing.
It's a discussion that gets emotional so fast.
Yeah.
And you can see why, right? It touches on everything: security, family, wealth for basically everyone listening.
It really does. And our sources for this, primarily from the Great Housing Contradiction: Home or Investment,
Mm-hmm.
give us a way to, step back from the pure frustration of it all.
To get past the noise.
Exactly, to focus on the quiet systemic tensions that actually created this whole mess in the first place.
Okay, so let's just jump right in, because if you've ever followed the housing debate, at any level you always hit this wall.
Yeah.
This really awkward moment where you just think, wait a second. If the smartest financial move is often to just wait, to hold land and not build on it.
To actively constrain the supply.
Right. What in the world have we tied the basic human need for shelter to? I mean, did any of us, the average person, actually want to create that kind of dynamic?
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. It's about understanding how habitation, just needing a roof over your head, got so tangled up with financial speculation.
And it sounds like the sources are saying it wasn't some big, sudden event.
Not at all. It didn't explode into being. The trail shows it sort of crept in through these really subtle and often even celebrated channels.
Which is fascinating because the starting point for most people, for you listening, is so simple. You just want shelter.
Of course.
You want a stable place for your family or just a foundation for your own life. That's the entire ambition. Most people don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I leverage a basic human need for maximum personal arbitrage?
No, and that's the real tragedy of this whole contradiction. The shift didn't happen because millions of us suddenly decided to become, greedy speculators.
So what drove it?
It was driven by the system making certain behaviors seem not just rational, but universally sensible. The source material has this fantastic line. It says, speculation slipped in quietly, wearing sensible shoes.
Sensible shoes. I love that. It perfectly captures how normal it all seemed, like it was just good financial hygiene.
It did.
But what does that look like in the real world? What's the advice that makes this whole speculative mindset feel so sensible?
Oh, it's that constant drumbeat of financial wisdom that we've all heard. It's in every newspaper column, every conversation you have about property.
Okay, so lay some of them out for us.
Well, the big one is, buy now before prices rise again.
Right, which treats a future price increase not as a risk, but as a foregone conclusion.
As a guarantee. Then there's, hold on, tight property always goes up in value over the long run.
That one defines a house primarily as a vehicle for capital appreciation.
It does.
Yeah.
And maybe the most powerful one is, don't sell yet. Wait for a better moment. You'll get less than it's worth today.
Okay, but I have to push back on that a little, because that genuinely sounds like responsible financial planning.
It does.
If I own an asset and I'm responsible for my family's future, the system expects me, it rewards me for maximizing its return, for waiting.
And that's the brilliant, maddening nature of the contradiction. The system absolutely rewards you for behaving that way.
Oh.
But over decades, that constant advice didn't just shape individual choices about, when to buy or sell. It fundamentally changed what housing is in our society. It implicitly made scarcity a desirable feature.
How so?
Well, if housing supply was actually abundant, if prices were stable and predictable, that core advice, hold on for appreciation, would just vanish. It would lose all its power.
So we've sort of accidentally built a system where what's rational for an individual homeowner's balance sheet is, well, it's systematically destructive for our collective need for affordable shelter.
You've nailed it. That's the core shift.
So let's really dig into that distinction. When does a home stop being a home and start, behaving like a bet? Because we're not just talking about people flipping houses here.
No, it's much more subtle. The sources define it as this crucial internal shift in logic.
What's the shift?
Speculation in this context isn't about how fast you transact. It's when the main calculation you make about your property changes. It's when the value of a home matters less for what it does.
It's utility, shelter, stability.
Exactly. And it starts to matter more for what it might become: a future payout, a retirement plan.
So, okay, let's make that concrete. If I buy a house and I spend, say, $50,000 fixing the foundation to keep my family safe, that's utility value.
That's utility.
But if I refuse to sell that same house for 2 years because I hear a new highway might be built nearby and I'm betting on that future value jump, That's speculation.
That is a perfect illustration. The moment that mental switch is flipped, where the speculative potential outweighs the present utility, the property starts to behave differently in the system.
Timing becomes more important than living in it.
Yes. Holding it, keeping it constrained, beats using it to its full potential as a home.
And the sources say the key insight here is that moment when, quote, waiting starts to feel clever.
It's a huge psychological turning point.
Yeah, waiting stops feeling like a missed opportunity to create a stable life and starts feeling like a shrewd strategic move.
It does. And once that logic takes root, that delay and constraint are actually valuable, it spreads. It goes beyond just one person's decision.
To the whole system.
Right. Think about a town where the tax code makes it cheap to just sit on undeveloped land. The rational landowner, they just sit on it.
Or the homeowner on the zoning board who votes against a new apartment building. Not because they're a bad person.
But because adding 50 new units might stabilize local prices, which would, in turn, lower the expected return on their own single biggest asset.
So the motive shifts from community building to asset protection.
Exactly. And that, according to the sources, is what makes the tension here pretty much irreconcilable.
So let's look at those two drivers side by side. I mean, can something really do both of these jobs at once? I have a hammer. It's useful. Maybe it's a collectible and has some value, but its primary purpose is utility. Housing is supposed to be the hammer.
But the investment side of its personality demands that it behaves like a bar of gold. Let's just compare the needs.
Okay.
Homes, for the people in them, feel better when they're available.
Predictable.
Yeah, when prices are steady. When the whole thing is honestly a little bit dull, stability is the goal.
I want my home to be boring. I do not want it to be a roller coaster ride.
You want predictability.
Yeah.
But investments, especially the kind that promise big returns, they work better when they are the exact opposite.
They need scarcity.
They thrive on scarcity, constraint, the expectation of rising prices, and being super sensitive to timing. They need that volatility.
Okay, so we've got one object, the house being pulled towards stability and abundance, and the other side is pulling it towards volatility and scarcity.
Two opposing forces.
When you tie them together like that, something has to break. What gives?
According to the sources, it is almost always the available and boring part of the home that gets sacrificed.
And why is that?
It's simple, really. The financial incentives that are built into the wider system, things like tax laws, lending rules, zoning, they all systematically reward the investment side. They reward constraint.
So if the biggest reward comes from price appreciation,
Then the whole structure is incentivized to create and maintain the conditions for appreciation, even if those exact same conditions are a total disaster for housing availability.
that feels like a structural issue that's just masquerading as a personal failing.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And that is the real takeaway here. The gut reaction, when we talk about high housing costs, is to blame somebody, a politician, a developer.
we focus on greed.
We do. But the sources remind us, when millions of people are all acting in a similar way for decades, holding out for higher prices, fighting new construction, they aren't all just spontaneously becoming malicious.
They're responding rationally to the environment we built.
Exactly that. They're playing the game by the rules they've been given.
But wait, couldn't someone say that's just a convenient excuse? If I own a property, I have a duty to my family to get the most value from that asset. If the rules reward me for doing that, how can I be expected to prioritize some vague collective good over my family's actual financial security?
That is the central, painful question, isn't it? You're expected to act rationally. The problem isn't your choice. The problem is that the system defines success in a way that is mutually exclusive with solving the housing shortage.
We've built an environment where rising prices are treated as good news.
Universally, a sign of a healthy market.
So what are the quiet, systemic shifts that happen when price appreciation becomes the main signal of success?
You start to see a few really dangerous things. First, high prices stop feeling like a severe societal problem.
Or a market failure?
Right. Instead, they feel like confirmation that the system is working perfectly for the people who already own assets. If your house doubles in value, you feel successful, not necessarily worried about the broader consequences.
Wow, so the symptom of the failure is reinterpreted as proof of success.
Precisely. And second, shortages stop feeling like an urgent crisis that we need to fix. Instead, they feel like proof of that all-important scarcity.
And scarcity in an investment context is what props up future value.
It guarantees it. If your neighborhood suddenly got an influx of new, affordable homes, that would threaten your scarcity premium.
So the very things that make housing a terrible market for homes, shortages, and high costs, are the essential features of a successful market for investments.
It's the total conflict of interest that we've just normalized over time.
And that's why delay and waiting start to feel reasonable, both financially and politically.
Yes, we end up asking, what will this property be worth in 5 years? Far more often than we ask, is this a good place for people to live right now? And that shift happens without anyone needing to have bad intentions. The market just follows the incentives.
Can you give us a quick real-world example of that tension in action?
Sure. Think about developing an empty lot in a city. From a pure shelter perspective, the goal should be to build as many homes as possible, as quickly as possible, to help ease demand.
Okay, that makes sense.
But from the investment perspective, the pressure comes from all the existing homeowners nearby. Their goal is to protect the scarcity value of their homes. So the developer faces endless zoning reviews, challenges, debates about neighborhood character.
All of which create delay.
Exactly. And delay costs the person who need the home. But delay often builds value for the person who already owns one by keeping future supply off the market.
It's just a fundamental mechanical contradiction. Homes are something we need. They require a responsive supply. But the financial system we've wrapped around them rewards speculation, which depends entirely on supply being slow and constrained.
We've forced one product to do two mutually exclusive jobs, and then we act surprised when it fails at one of them.
And that's why this crisis of affordability, when you look at it through this lens, starts to feel a lot less mysterious.
It feels almost inevitable. If you design and reward housing to behave like a speculative asset, if rising prices are your main metric for success, and shortages are seen as a positive sign,
Then it's not surprising that homes start behaving less like places to live.
and a lot more like chips on a casino table, valued for timing and scarcity.
So we've managed to normalize a contradiction that, when you really stop and look at it, seems completely absurd. This deep dive, it's not about blaming any one group or saying there's one easy fix.
No, it's about taking that essential first step. Just recognizing the deep structural tension that we've all collectively gotten used to ignoring.
It's about pausing before we just rush off to treat the symptoms again.
Because when you recognize the contradiction, you can stop arguing about whether individual people are behaving badly,
Yeah.
and you can start asking whether the environment itself makes these self-defeating behaviors the only rational choice.
And so, we'll leave you with the final question, one that builds directly on what we found in the source material. If the link between home and investment is structurally designed to create and maintain scarcity, who actually benefits most and who exerts the greatest influence to keep that structural link exactly where it is?
Something to think about.
Something to chew on as you look at the quiet, sensible shifts that define the housing landscape all around us today.